Hey there, deep divers. Ready for a deep dive. Today we're going to explore something pretty heavy,
Yeah,
the human rights situation in Pakistan.
absolutely.
But more specifically, we're looking at the experiences of religious and ethnic minorities.
Yeah, that's right.
We're going to cut through the headlines, go beyond the usual sound bites,
Right.
and really try to understand the reality on the ground for these communities.
Absolutely. This report we're diving into doesn't hold back.
It doesn't.
It pulls no punches.
Yeah.
It gives us a stark look at the challenges
Ooh, I like that.
faced by minorities in Pakistan.
So we're talking about a nation that, on paper, on the surface, guarantees equality for all.
Right.
But what's the reality?
Yeah.
What's life really like for these communities?
But to give you an idea of just how in-depth this report goes, it was compiled by a group of experts with diverse backgrounds,
Oh,
including people like Ender Mohan Kapai, a former member of the University Grants Commission,
wow.
and R.K. Gupta, a principal at a constituent college of the University of Delhi.
Okay, so we've got serious academic firepower behind this report.
Yes.
What's the central mission here? What are we trying to uncover with this deep dive?
So the report aims to go beyond the often simplistic narratives we hear in the news.
Okay.
It delves into the historical context.
Yeah.
It explores the current challenges and even offers recommendations for the future.
Oh, wow.
It's really a journey from partition to the present day. And it's packed with shocking statistics, personal stories, and critical analysis.
All right, I'm hooked. Let's jump right in. Where do we begin?
Well, the report kicks off with a fascinating historical anecdote that really sets the stage for understanding the complexities of this issue.
Ooh, I love a good story. Lay it on me.
So picture this 1947, the newly formed nation of Pakistan.
Okay.
Jogindranath Mandal, a Dalit leader from East Pakistan, joins the Pakistani government.
A Dalit leader in the government. That's surprising considering, the context of partition and the creation of a Muslim-majority state.
Right, and he wasn't just any figurehead. He was the Minister of Law and Labor. He even handled the portfolios for Commonwealth and Kashmir affairs.
Wow.
But here's the twist. Just 3 years later, he resigns.
3 years! Something must have gone seriously wrong.
He resigned in protest, citing the mistreatment of minorities in Pakistan. And he didn't just leave quietly.
Oh.
He penned a scathing letter to the Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan, detailing the abuses he witnessed.
Wow, talk about speaking truth to power. This letter must be a crucial piece of historical evidence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a powerful testament to the challenges faced by minorities, even in the earliest days of Pakistan's existence.
So even from the outset, this idea of Pakistan as a, quote-unquote, land of the pure
Right.
was creating tension and exclusion.
Exactly. And the report traces how this concept played out over time, impacting the legal, societal norms and the lived experiences of minority communities.
Okay, so we've kind of set the historical stage.
Yeah.
But what about the present?
Yeah.
What's the situation for minorities in Pakistan today?
Well, the report hits us with a stark statistic right off the bat.
Okay.
The Hindu population in Pakistan has seen a dramatic decline since 1947.
Okay, so we're talking about a country that was created in part due to religious tensions and the partition of India.
Right.
But how dramatic of a decline are we talking about here?
Hold on to your hats, because it's a big one.
Okay.
Based on natural population growth,
Uh-huh.
there should be significantly more Hindus in Pakistan today.
Yeah.
But the actual numbers tell a different story.
Yeah.
We're talking about a potential undercount of almost 500,000 Hindus.
500,000? That's staggering. What explains such a huge discrepancy?
The report points to the delayed release of the 2017 census data, which raises questions about transparency and potential attempts to downplay the issue. And this dwindling population trend isn't limited to Hindus.
Oh.
Christian and Sikh communities have experienced similar declines.
So this isn't just a historical blip.
No.
This is an ongoing problem.
Exactly, and it goes beyond just religious minorities. Even Muslim groups that aren't part of the dominant Sunni sect face discrimination.
Wait, even Muslims are facing persecution within Pakistan.
Yes. Think about groups like Shia Hazaras, Ahmadis, Baloch, Pashtuns, and Sindhis.
Wow.
They often experience prejudice and violence, highlighting how issues of power and control are intertwined with religion in Pakistan.
So this isn't just about religious differences.
No.
It's about who holds the reins of power.
Exactly. And the report digs into this power dynamic, exploring how it plays out in the legal system, social structures, and even access to resources.
This is already painting a pretty complex and concerning picture.
Yes.
But before we go any further, can we get some concrete examples of this discrimination in action?
Absolutely. The report provides several chilling anecdotes that really drive home the reality on the ground.
Okay.
For example, it mentions cases of Sikh families having to pay jizya,
Is tax.
a tax historically levied on non-Muslims,
Oh,
just to ensure safe passage through certain areas.
that's unbelievable. It's like something out of a history book, not the 21st century.
Right, and it gets worse.
Oh, no.
The report details the destruction of a 150-year-old Hindu temple by land mafias.
Land mafias. What role do they play in all of this?
They often target minorities, exploiting their vulnerable position to seize land and property with little fear of consequences.
So it's not just religious persecution.
Right.
It's also economic exploitation tied to these power imbalances.
Exactly. And the report highlights how discrimination extends to basic necessities.
Oh, wow.
There are documented instances of minorities being denied aid during crises, even during the COVID-19 pandemic.
That's just inhumane. Denying people aid based on their religion is just unconscionable.
It is. And this discrimination is often fueled by a legal system that, while claiming to uphold justice, often fails to protect minorities.
You're talking about the Blasphemy Law, right? I've heard about it, but it sounds terrifying.
It's a controversial law, originally a remnant of British colonial time, but heavily modified under General Zia-ul-Haq in the 1980s.
Okay.
It's been used to target minorities disproportionately ever since.
Okay. Break it down for me. How does this law actually work?
Essentially, it criminalizes any act deemed insulting to Islam,
Okay.
including speech or actions perceived as disrespectful to the Prophet Muhammad.
And what kind of punishments are we talking about?
The penalties range from fines and imprisonment to, in some cases, the death penalty.
The death penalty.
But-
Just for insulting a religion.
Yes, and that's where it gets truly chilling.
Oh, gosh.
The report details how this law creates a climate of fear where even unfounded accusations
Wow.
before any trial or conviction
Oh, my God.
can lead to mob violence and killings.
Wow, that's terrifying. It seems like this law is being weaponized against minorities.
Exactly. The report dives into several cases that illustrate this very point. One of the most well-known is the case of Asia Bibi.
Asia Bibi. That name rings a bell. Remind me of her story.
Asia Bibi is a Christian woman who in 2010 became the first woman sentenced to death under Pakistan's Blasphemy Law.
What led to such an extreme sentence?
She was accused of making derogatory remarks about the Prophet Muhammad during an argument with Muslim co-workers.
So an argument escalated to a death sentence. That's insane.
It highlights the volatile nature of this law and how easily it can be exploited. Asia Bibi spent years on death row, her case sparking international outrage.
Did anything come of that international pressure?
Yes. After years of legal battles and appeals, she was finally acquitted by the Supreme Court in 2018.
Okay.
But even then, she had to flee the country for her own safety due to threats from extremist groups.
So even after being cleared by the highest court, she still wasn't safe in Pakistan. This blasphemy law sounds like a nightmare.
It's a major point of contention in the realm of human rights in Pakistan. Many argue that it fuels intolerance and is used to persecute minorities.
This deep dive is already so intense. It's clear that minorities in Pakistan face a mountain of challenges. But before we wrap up this part of our exploration, I want to focus on one particularly horrific aspect.
Okay.
Forced conversions. What does the report reveal about this issue?
This is one of the most disturbing aspects of the report.
Okay.
It states that according to some estimates, as many as 700 Christian and 1,000 Hindu girls are forcibly converted to Islam every year in Pakistan.
1,000 girls every year. That's absolutely horrifying. How is this even happening?
The report outlines a common pattern:
Okay.
abduction, forced conversion, and marriage to a Muslim man. It's a tactic used to control and exploit vulnerable young women from minority communities.
It's hard to believe this is happening in the 21st century. Are the authorities doing anything to stop this?
Sadly, the report indicates that powerful institutions, including shrines, seminaries, and even some politicians, often support these conversions,
Wow.
providing protection for the perpetrators and making legal recourse extremely difficult.
So it's like a system designed to silence and oppress these girls.
In many ways, yes. And the report highlights a particularly chilling case,
Okay.
the story of Rinkle Kumari.
Tell me about her.
Rinkle Kumari was a Hindu girl who was abducted and forced to convert to Islam and marry her abductor. What's even more disturbing is that she was paraded on television claiming she had converted willingly.
Wait, they used her as propaganda?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But those watching the broadcast noticed she was visibly distressed and seemingly being coached by the men accompanying her. It cast serious doubt on the validity of her supposed quote-unquote willing conversion.
This is truly heartbreaking. It sounds like these girls are trapped in a system that works against them at every turn.
It's a grim reality. And it's why organizations like the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, or HRCP,
The HRCP
are so important.
I was going to ask about them. The report mentions their work right. Tell me more about the HRCP and what they're doing to combat these human rights abuses.
The HRCP is a leading human rights organization in Pakistan.
Okay.
They work tirelessly to document these abuses, advocate for legal reforms, and provide support to victims.
That's incredible work, but it sounds incredibly challenging given the deeply entrenched issues we've been discussing.
It is. The report acknowledges that even organizations like the HRCP face significant limitations.
Yeah.
They often struggle to challenge the powerful religious and political forces that perpetuate these injustices.
So even those trying to help are facing an uphill battle. This is all pretty overwhelming. What does the report say about the bigger picture? How did we even get here?
That's where the historical context becomes crucial.
Okay.
It helps us understand the roots of this crisis and why it's so difficult to solve.
All right, so let's rewind the tape a bit further and dive into that historical context the report emphasizes.
Absolutely.
Because to really grasp the depth of this problem, we need to understand how we got here.
Right. The report digs into how the very concept of Pakistan as an Islamic state has had a ripple effect on minority rights.
Okay.
It's not just about present-day policies, it's about the foundational ideas that shape the nation.
So it's about the DNA of Pakistan, so to speak. How has this idea of an Islamic state played out in practice?
Well, the report highlights figures like Abu al-Maududi, the founder of Jamaat-e-Islami, who was a major proponent of establishing an Islamic state back in the early 1950s.
Jamaat-e-Islami, that rings a bell. Remind me, what did they stand for?
They're a prominent Islamist political party in Pakistan.
Okay.
And Maududi's vision was to have Pakistan's legal system fully based on Sharia law. He believed sovereignty should rest solely with Allah.
So essentially, he was advocating for a theocracy.
Precisely.
Oh.
And this vision had a massive impact on how minorities were perceived and treated.
Okay.
It created a hierarchy with Muslims at the top.
It sounds like this ideology set the stage for non-Muslims to be treated as second-class citizens.
Unfortunately, that's the case. And the report highlights how this was further amplified with the rise of General Zia-ul-Haq in the late 1970s.
Okay.
He implemented policies aimed at Islamizing Pakistan even further.
We touched on Zia-ul-Haq earlier. He was the one who strengthened the Blasphemy Law, right? What other changes did he bring about?
His impact went far beyond the Blasphemy Law. He made significant changes to the education system, pushing Islamic teachings into the curriculum even in secular schools.
So he was shaping young minds, instilling this idea of Islamic supremacy from a young age. Talk about indoctrination.
It's a point the report doesn't shy away from. These policies significantly impacted societal attitudes, fostering a more hostile and intolerant environment for minorities.
It sounds like Zia-ul-Haq's actions continue to cast a long shadow on Pakistan today.
That's one of the report's key takeaways. It underscores that the human rights situation we see today is directly linked to this historical context.
Right.
It's a legacy that continues to fuel discrimination.
We're really peeling back the layers here, revealing the deeply rooted issues that contribute to Pakistan's human rights crisis.
Yeah.
But the report doesn't stop at internal factors, does it? It mentions external influences as well.
You're absolutely right. The report also explores how external events, such as the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s, played a role in radicalizing Pakistani society.
That's an interesting connection. I hadn't considered the link to the Soviet-Afghan War. Tell me more about that.
During that conflict, Pakistan became a central hub for Islamist groups fighting against the Soviet Union, with backing from Western powers and funding from countries like Saudi Arabia.
So Pakistan was drawn into this Cold War proxy conflict, and it had unintended consequences.
Exactly. The report suggests that the influx of funding and support for these Islamist groups, coupled with the promotion of Wahhabism, a particularly conservative interpretation of Islam, further fueled religious extremism within Pakistan.
It sounds like Pakistan got caught in a web of international politics and a religious ideology, and the consequences were devastating for its minorities.
That's a key takeaway. The report emphasizes that to understand the human rights situation in Pakistan, you can't just look within its borders.
Right.
You have to consider the complex interplay of both internal and external factors that have shaped this crisis.
So it's about connecting the dots, understanding how historical events, Global power dynamics and internal ideologies have all converged to create this perfect storm of intolerance.
Precisely. Yeah. And the report argues that without recognizing this complex web of influences, any attempts to address the human rights situation will be incomplete and ultimately ineffective.
It's about understanding the root causes, not just treating the symptoms.
Exactly. And the report dives even deeper, exploring the work of human rights organizations within Pakistan.
Okay, we briefly discussed the HRCP earlier, but I'd love to learn more about the overall landscape of human rights advocacy in Pakistan. What does the report highlight?
The report acknowledges the courageous work done by numerous human rights defenders and organizations operating within Pakistan.
Okay.
These individuals often face immense challenges and put themselves at great risk.
What kind of challenges are we talking about?
They're working in an environment where freedom of expression is often restricted.
Right.
They're frequently subjected to threats and intimidation and sometimes even violence. It's incredibly dangerous work.
It sounds like they're walking a tightrope, trying to raise awareness and push for change while navigating a very hostile landscape.
Exactly. And the report highlights the crucial need for international support for these brave individuals and organizations.
Yeah.
It stresses that the global community has a significant role to play in holding the Pakistani government accountable for its human rights obligations
Okay.
and ensuring the safety of those fighting for these rights.
So it's not just about internal reform.
Right.
It's about external pressure and support for those on the front lines within Pakistan.
Absolutely. It's a collective effort that requires collaboration and solidarity.
Hmm.
But as the report points out, international engagement needs to be strategic and thoughtful.
Right.
It's important to consider the complexities of the situation and ensure that any actions taken don't unintentionally make things worse for minorities.
That's a crucial point. Good intentions aren't enough. We need to act wisely and effectively if we truly want to make a difference.
I completely agree. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's bring it back to our listener. Why should they care about all of this?
Yeah.
How can we connect this knowledge to their lives?
That's a great question. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of this issue.
Right.
But it's important to remember that this is about real people's lives.
Absolutely.
We're talking about individuals facing discrimination, violence, and fear simply because of their religion or ethnicity.
Yeah. And it's not just about religion. It's about basic human dignity.
Right.
It's about ensuring that everyone has the right to live freely and practice their beliefs without fear of persecution or discrimination.
We've uncovered a lot of unsettling truths about the plight of minorities in Pakistan.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel a sense of despair, but I'm curious, does the report offer any hope?
It does.
Okay.
It doesn't leave us hanging. It offers some potential solutions paths forward.
Okay, good. What does it suggest can be done to improve this situation?
The report lays out several recommendations urging both the Pakistani government and the international community to take concrete steps to protect the rights of all citizens.
Okay, let's break that down. What specific actions does the report recommend for the Pakistani government?
Well, first and foremost, it calls for a serious overhaul of the legal system.
Okay.
They specifically recommend reviewing and potentially amending discriminatory laws,
Okay.
with a particular focus on that blasphemy law we talked about.
Right, the blasphemy law has come up a lot in our deep dive.
Okay.
What kind of changes does the report suggest for that specific law?
They argue that it's too easily used as a tool to oppress minorities,
Yeah.
and that it needs to be either significantly revised or completely repealed. The goal is to ensure that laws protect all citizens equally, not just the majority.
That makes sense. We've seen how that law hangs over the heads of minorities, creating a climate of fear and leading to violence. But laws alone can't change deeply rooted societal attitudes, right?
You're absolutely right. The report acknowledges that legal reforms are just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
It also strongly recommends promoting religious tolerance and understanding within Pakistani society itself.
So going beyond legislation and trying to change hearts and minds, how do they propose doing that?
The report suggests things like educational initiatives that teach about different faiths and their shared values.
Okay.
They also recommend public awareness campaigns to counter negative stereotypes and prejudices. It's about fostering empathy and understanding.
It sounds like a massive undertaking trying to shift ingrained cultural beliefs.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
But the report argues it's absolutely essential.
Yeah.
You can't address this problem without tackling both the legal framework and the underlying societal attitudes that perpetuate discrimination.
It's about creating a culture where everyone feels safe and valued, regardless of their beliefs. That's a beautiful vision, but what about the immediate threat of violence that many minorities face?
That's a critical point,
Yeah.
and the report addresses it head-on. It urges the Pakistani government to take concrete steps to protect minority communities from violence and hold perpetrators accountable.
So it's about translating words into action, ensuring that protection is more than just lip service. What kind of concrete actions are we talking about?
The report suggests things like establishing special police units dedicated to protecting minority communities,
Okay.
reforming law enforcement training to address biases, and creating effective mechanisms for reporting and investigating hate crimes. It's about making sure that those who target minorities face real consequences.
We learned about the horrifying issue of forced conversions. Does the report offer any solutions for that specific problem?
Absolutely. The report specifically calls for enacting laws that explicitly prohibit forced conversions,
Okay.
making it crystal clear that this practice won't be tolerated.
Yeah.
It also urges the government to establish mechanisms that protect vulnerable communities, especially young women, from this kind of abuse.
It sounds like there's a lot that needs to happen within Pakistan to address these deeply rooted issues.
Right.
But the report also acknowledges the role of the international community right.
Yeah.
What actions do they suggest?
They're very clear on this point. Sustained international pressure on the Pakistani government is vital to ensuring human rights for all citizens. The world can't just stand by and watch.
So keeping a spotlight on the issue and holding the Pakistani government accountable for its actions, how can the international community do that effectively?
The report recommends a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
International organizations, foreign governments, and human rights groups all have a role to play.
Yeah.
They can monitor the situation, document abuses, and speak out against injustices, making sure these issues stay on the global agenda.
It's about ensuring that the voices of those who are suffering are heard on a larger stage. But are there other ways to exert pressure beyond just raising awareness?
The report suggests that economic and diplomatic tools can be powerful levers for change. Things like linking aid or trade agreements to improvements in human rights
Okay.
can incentivize the Pakistani government to make meaningful reforms.
So using economic and diplomatic leverage to encourage positive change, that makes sense. But it seems like a delicate balancing act.
It absolutely is. The report cautions that any actions taken by the international community need to be carefully considered to avoid unintended negative consequences. It's not about punishing Pakistan. It's about using these tools strategically to encourage them to do better.
This deep dive has truly been an eye-opening experience. It's revealed the deep-seated challenges, the historical context, and even some potential paths forward. What stands out to you as the most important takeaway from this report?
For me, it's the emphasis on collective action. The report drives home the point that this isn't just Pakistan's problem to solve.
Yeah.
It's a global issue that demands our attention and engagement.
Right.
We all have a role to play in promoting human rights and standing up for those who are marginalized and oppressed, no matter where they are.
I couldn't agree more. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the problem and think that our individual actions won't make a difference.
Right?
But this report reminds us that we can't just turn away.
Exactly. These are real people's lives,
Yeah.
and their stories matter.
Yeah.
And each of us has a responsibility to act in whatever way we can.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but it's clear that this conversation is far from over. This report has given you a deeper understanding of the challenges faced by religious and ethnic minorities in Pakistan.
Yeah.
But it also raises a crucial question for you. Knowing what you know now, what responsibility, if any, do you feel to act? What can you as an individual do to contribute to positive change in this complex and challenging situation? That's something I encourage you to reflect on. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep striving for a better world.
Yeah, and, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, right? Like, what can one person really do?
It is. It is. But even small actions can have a ripple effect.
Absolutely.
So whether it's educating yourself about the issue, donating to organizations working on the ground, or speaking out against injustice, every little bit counts.
Right, and don't underestimate the power of simply having these conversations, talking about these issues with your friends, your family, spreading awareness. That in itself can make a difference.
We've talked about the challenges, the historical context, but what about solutions? What can actually be done to make things better for minorities in Pakistan?
Well, the report doesn't just highlight the problems. It actually offers some concrete recommendations.
Oh, good. I like that.
For both the Pakistani government and the international community.
Okay, so let's dive into those. What does the report suggest?
One of the key recommendations is to reform the legal system.
Okay.
Specifically, they talk about addressing discriminatory laws, like the Blasphemy Law.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that blasphemy law. What kind of reforms are they suggesting?
Well, they propose either significantly revising it to prevent its misuse or even repealing it altogether. The idea is to create a legal framework that genuinely protects all citizens equally.
That makes sense. But as we've discussed, laws alone aren't enough. They need to be coupled with societal change, right?
Absolutely. And the report recognizes that. It emphasizes the importance of promoting religious tolerance and understanding within Pakistani society itself.
Okay, so how do they suggest tackling that?
Well, they recommend things like educational initiatives to teach people about different faiths.
Okay.
And public awareness campaigns to challenge negative stereotypes and prejudice.
So it's about fostering empathy and respect for diversity.
Exactly. It's a long-term effort, but it's crucial for creating lasting change.
This all sounds very promising, but what about the immediate threat of violence?
Right. That's a pressing concern. And the report stresses the need for concrete actions to protect minority communities.
Okay, like what?
They suggest establishing special police units trained to handle hate crimes and reforming law enforcement training to address biases.
Yeah.
They also emphasize the importance of holding perpetrators accountable.
That's key.
To deter future violence.
We also discussed the issue of forced conversions. Does the report address that?
It does. They recommend enacting laws that explicitly prohibit forced conversions.
Okay.
And creating mechanisms to protect vulnerable individuals, particularly young women.
It's heartbreaking to think about what these girls go through. It's clear that a lot needs to happen within Pakistan to address these issues. But what about the role of the international community? What can we do?
The report argues that sustained international pressure on Pakistan is essential.
Okay.
International organizations, foreign governments, and human rights groups all have a role to play.
How so?
Well, they can monitor the situation, document abuses, and speak out against injustice.
So keeping the spotlight on the issue and holding the Pakistani government accountable.
Exactly. They can also use economic and diplomatic tools to incentivize positive change.
Like what?
Things like linking aid or trade agreements to improvements in human rights.
That's a good idea, but it requires careful consideration.
Right, it does. The report cautions against actions that could unintentionally harm minorities.
Right, it's about finding the right balance.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been really insightful and honestly pretty disturbing.
Yeah, it's tough to hear about these injustices.
It is, but knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely. And that's why we do these deep dives.
Exactly, to shed light on these issues and hopefully inspire action.
Right, because even though it's a complex and challenging situation, we can't just turn away.
I think that's the biggest takeaway from all of this. We all have a responsibility to act.
I agree. Whether it's educating ourselves, supporting organizations working on the ground, or speaking out against injustice.
Every little bit counts.
It does.
Yeah.
And remember, change doesn't happen overnight, but by working together persistently, we can make a difference.
I love that. This has been a heavy deep dive, but an important one.
It has.
I hope this conversation has inspired you to learn more and to consider your own role in advocating for human rights.
Me too.
We've provided some resources in the show notes if you'd like to dig deeper or get involved.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep striving for a more just and equitable world for all.